Welcome to the Royal Heritage, your premier destination for captivating and educational content on world royalty's rich history and heritage. Delve into the fascinating world of history, kings, queens and dynasties as we uncover the stories behind majestic palaces, legendary monarchs and enduring traditions. Florida is known worldwide as a dream vacation destination. With its sunny weather, stunning beaches and famous attractions like Walt Disney World, it draws millions of visitors every year. But beyond the theme parks and coastlines lies a fascinating and complex history. Florida is more than just a vacation spot. It's a land with a story millions of years in the making. Still, before then, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel, like, share, and stay updated on all our latest videos. For much of its geologic past, the land we now call Florida was submerged beneath the ocean. This underwater existence created layers of sedimentary rock, which today provide valuable natural resources such as phosphate and potash, essential ingredients in fertilizers and other products. Around 5 million years ago, the waters began to recede, leaving behind vast grasslands that became home to incredible prehistoric creatures. Fossil hunters flocked to Florida for remains of saber-toothed tigers, mastodons, giant sloths, and other Ice Age mammals that once roamed its plains. The first human inhabitants arrived thousands of years ago. They were descendants of people who had crossed the Bering Land Bridge between modern-day Russia and Alaska, migrating southward over centuries. Archaeological evidence shows that humans lived in Florida at least 12,000 years ago, surviving as hunter-gatherers during the tail end of the Ice Age. These early communities lived alongside megafauna, relying on the land for food, tools and shelter. Over time, as the climate warmed and large Ice Age animals disappeared, Florida's native peoples adapted. In the north, tribes like the Appalachians practiced agriculture, cultivating crops like corn, then known as maize, in the region's fertile soils. In the south, the Calusa thrived by fishing and gathering from the rich coastal waters, forgoing agriculture altogether. These communities built extensive trade networks, exchanging goods with other tribes across the Americas. Yet, they had no domesticated animals or metals, relying instead on the ingenious use of natural resources. When Europeans first made contact with Florida, the land was home to an estimated 350,000 to 700,000 indigenous people. Their way of life would soon face irreversible change. In 1513, Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de León landed on the peninsula, claiming it for Spain and naming it La Florida, in honor of Spain's Easter celebration, Pascua Florida, or Feast of Flowers. According to legend, Ponce de León was searching for the Fountain of Youth, a mythical spring said to grant eternal life. While the story is more myth than fact, his arrival marked the beginning of a turbulent era for Florida's indigenous peoples. The Spanish attempted to colonize the area multiple times, but early efforts were met with fierce resistance from native tribes and the forces of nature. Hurricanes and hostile encounters forced the Spanish to abandon many of their initial settlements. It wasn't until 1565, with the establishment of St. Augustine, that Spain secured a foothold in Florida. This city became the first permanent European settlement in what is now the United States. From St. Augustine, the Spanish began spreading their influence. They set up missions to convert native populations to Roman Catholicism, often forcibly. These missions aimed to reshape indigenous cultures, replacing traditional practices with European customs and religion. However, perhaps the most devastating consequence of European contact was the introduction of diseases like smallpox and measles. Without immunity to these illnesses, native populations suffered catastrophic losses, with some communities losing as much as 90% of their people. Despite their challenges, Florida's indigenous tribes fiercely resisted colonization. Yet, over the centuries, their numbers dwindled, and their lands were overtaken by European settlers. The Spanish, in turn, faced competition from other European powers. French and English explorers sought to establish their claims in Florida, leading to decades of conflict. St. Augustine became a strategic battleground, with the Spanish defending it against attacks from rivals like Sir Francis Drake and René Goulaine de Laudonnière. By the late 18th century, Florida's fate was still being contested, but the legacy of its early inhabitants and settlers remains embedded in its land and culture. The history of Florida is not just a tale of sunny beaches and vacation dreams, it is a story of survival, adaptation, and the ever-changing tides of human and natural history. America's story is filled with moments of change and transformation, and few symbols of that change are as striking as the arrival of the horse. Introduced by Europeans, horses spread across the continent and traded from group to group until they reached the Central Plains. For indigenous tribes who had never even seen a European, horses became a vital part of their lives, revolutionizing hunting, travel, and culture. But while horses brought change, the arrival of Europeans in Florida was a harbinger of turmoil for the people and land. By the early 1700s, Spain's grip on Florida was weakening. The British colonies were growing along the eastern seaboard, creeping ever closer. In 1733, the founding of Georgia placed British settlers right on Spain's doorstep. Spain responded by offering freedom to enslaved people who escaped to Florida, granting them protection under the Spanish crown on the condition that they converted to Roman Catholicism. For hundreds of enslaved individuals, this offer meant freedom and a chance at a new life. By 1756, however, the conflicts of Europe spilled into the Americas with the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War. When it ended in 1763, Britain claimed Florida as part of its victory, reshaping the political landscape of the region. Yet British control was short-lived. After the American Revolution, Florida was returned to Spain in 1783, though this second period of Spanish rule was marked by uncertainty. The United States viewed Florida as a territory ripe for expansion, and settlers frequently crossed its borders, laying the groundwork for its eventual annexation. In 1821, after years of conflict and costly wars, Spain ceded Florida to the United States. For many, this was a moment of opportunity, but for others, it brought tragedy. The escapees who had found freedom in Spanish Florida now faced the threat of being returned to slavery under US laws. Many of these individuals had integrated with the Seminoles, a resilient group made up of Native Americans and other refugees who had fled displacement. Together, they resisted US expansion, but their defiance sparked further conflict. The United States launched military campaigns to remove indigenous peoples from Florida, leading to the Seminole Wars. These wars devastated local tribes, forcing many onto reservations or into forced migrations to Indian Territory in the West. By the mid-19th century, most of Florida's native population had been killed, displaced, or assimilated. Despite this, a few Seminoles managed to hold out, hiding in the vast Everglades for generations. In 1845, Florida became the 27th state in the Union. Like much of the South, its economy relied heavily on enslaved labor, with nearly half of the population enslaved by the 1850 census. This reliance on slavery shaped Florida's politics, and in 1861, it became the third state to secede from the Union, joining the Confederacy during the Civil War. Florida saw little direct combat during the war, but played a significant role as a supplier of goods and a haven for smugglers trying to evade Union blockades. After the war, Florida entered a period known as Reconstruction. During this time, efforts were made to rebuild the state and integrate freed African Americans into society. However, these gains were short-lived. By the end of Reconstruction in 1876, laws and policies emerged across the South, including Florida, that stripped African Americans of their rights. This era, known as Jim Crow, enforced racial segregation and inequality for decades. Despite these challenges, Florida began to grow. The expansion of railroads in the late 19th century transformed the state, boosting agriculture and tourism. Florida became famous for its citrus industry, with oranges and grapefruits transported across the country. Tourists, drawn by the warm climate, started visiting in large numbers, laying the foundation for the state's modern economy. Florida also played a key role in the Spanish-American War of 1898, serving as a staging ground for troops heading to Cuba. As the 20th century began, Florida's population and importance continued to rise. The state weathered the Great Depression and contributed to the World War II effort by hosting military training camps, which brought new infrastructure and industries to the region. After the war, Florida became a symbol of growth and innovation. The civil rights movement of the mid-20th century brought changes to the state, as racial segregation laws were repealed and equality slowly advanced. Florida's geographic position also made it a key player in Cold War politics. The Cuban Revolution of 1959 brought waves of immigrants to Florida, reshaping its culture and economy. During the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, Florida's proximity to Cuba placed it at the center of global tensions. Florida also became a hub of the space race. NASA's Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral launched the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions, including the first human voyage to the Moon. In more recent years, Florida has continued to play a vital role in space exploration, hosting private companies like SpaceX alongside NASA. Today, Florida is known for its diverse history and culture, as well as its vibrant tourism industry. From its ancient indigenous communities to Spanish colonization, from the citrus groves to the magic of Walt Disney World, Florida's story is one of resilience and transformation. As the third most populous state in the United States, it remains a place where the past and future intertwine. If you enjoyed this exploration of Florida history and want to learn more about similar topics, please consider subscribing to our channel. Don't forget to like and share this video with friends and family who might also be interested in the fascinating world of history and its practices. Your support helps us create more engaging content that celebrates our shared heritage. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to bringing you more insights into the captivating realm of history.